The Republican Zone is brought to you by Drew Murray, a modern view from the Republican lens, covering local and national news, understanding that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to politics. The Republican Zone airs Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. and Saturday from 3 to 4 p.m.
Good afternoon. You're listening to USALA Radio. I am your host, Drew Murray, and you are listening to the Republican Zone. I have my friend here, Randy Robinson from Triple R Consulting. Thank you for coming, Randy.
Oh, you're welcome, Drew. I'm happy to be here. I'm glad to see that you've taken your talents onto the greater airwaves. I think that absolutely a voice of the Republican Party that locally we absolutely need.
Yes, no, I think we definitely need a voice. And so Randy and I met on my campaign trail. I announced about a year ago. When I announced, I had an idea of what I was doing. You know, I'm a marketing guy, so I was able to put together my marketing pieces, my palm card, my bio, and things like that. But beyond that, I didn't really know what I was doing. So,
Well, I think that you brought your principles from just being a leader in your community. Logan Square.
Logan Square Neighborhood Association, correct?
Neighborhood
Yes.
Association. The fact that you actually had a background in marketing tools, particularly that's what kind of campaigning is now. It's
Sure.
like you wrote it out almost like you're rolling out a product. So the fact of the matter that you have this skill set actually made you prepared to campaign. You just didn't know the intricate dynamics of the system, the
That's
cycle,
absolutely
and meeting the people.
You're selling yourself, right? And so I remember, so Algernon Allen, our friend, both our friend, actually, he texted me and he said, Drew, how's your campaign going? It was probably, I don't know if it was December or January, almost 12 months ago. And I said, everything's going great, but I can't find anyone to be a campaign manager, campaign consultant, because, you know, it's probably not surprising. There are not a whole lot of Republican consultants out there. in
Not
Philadelphia.
surprising whatsoever.
So that's how we met. Algernon connected us. We met at String Theory School. Was the first time we met,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and then it went on from there.
institution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit about String Theory School and other schools around the city. Education in the city we'll go into. But so yeah, then we got rolling into the campaign. You taught me a lot. Right off the bat, I mean, you kind of told me the ins and outs of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is quite an interesting party in the city of Philadelphia.
Transitioning, as we say.
Yes,
We have
and it
new
is
leadership.
transitioning. Yes, I mean, one of the biggest surprises I tell people when I started, I was a Democrat this time last year, or probably this time last year was right when I changed. I knew there were 66 ward leaders in the Democratic Party. And in fact, a lot of them are elected politicians. The ward leader in the 8th, where I live on the Democratic side, is Larry Farnese. I assumed, I'll be honest, I didn't think there were going to be 66 ward leaders on the Republican side.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised that, because the city is just so overwhelmingly Democratic and has been for a few decades, that people fail to realize that there is a complete party system on the right that has all the mechanisms and apparatus of the Democratic Party. The structures are absolutely the same. It's just that one just a little bit more pronounced than the other.
Yes, one is a little more pronounced, has a lot more registered voters, about 8 to 1. One has, let's face it, a lot more money.
Yeah, I mean that's the byproduct of having elected officials in success. You get the accoutrements of the king.
Yes.
And the Democratic Party here absolutely just dominates in terms on the fiscal aspect of politics locally.
And I don't think most people, unless you run or someone like you who helps run campaigns, you don't realize how much money it takes to run a campaign.
Yeah, that's just what it is. Unfortunately, it takes money, and particularly, get your word out there. Before, when you had a more condensed community, you can do a lot of this just a hand-to-hand retail politicking. But now, particularly the way the world's set up and people just moving around in space, you got to reach them through other means and largely electronic and media. That's just where campaigns are.
Sure. No, I went to, I would say, 5 days a week, 3 events every night. You don't know, and I did see a lot of people, but it doesn't matter how many people you see. When you look at how many, and I forget the exact number, when I looked and figured out, wow, how many people did I actually get in front of? Because I do think that most people who I spoke to in person, whether it was door-to-door knocking or going to events, and it was only Republicans voting in the primary, I think most of them voted for me. But
Yeah, the what you're finding now in terms of campaigning, the truth of the matter is that one of the most effective ways to garner votes is face to face. The hard part about it is that do you have the time and space, and energy to actually meet enough voters?
Sure.
But absolutely, I think that once voters met you, it was very easy for you to compel them to vote for you, particularly in an at-large race when they had, the voter has 5 options.
Sure.
I just couldn't have seen, particularly in that Republican primary, them not wanting, that didn't consider you one of the top
Sure.
5 candidates. I think that was our greatest asset in the campaign. Unfortunately, it's the hardest one to accomplish to a large level of success, which is retail and hand-to-hand politicking. But yeah, but in general, when candidates met you, you presented extremely well. Again, but you get a Republican in this town, and they meet you and they see you and they're like, oh, you're balanced, level-headed, and hey, you're not a right winger or zany.
Yeah,
the fact
a
that,
moderate. Yes.
Yeah, you're a moderate in the fact that hey, there's this Republican who's out knocking my door asking for a vote. They're like, where'd you come from?
No, it's funny. There were a number of people who said to me, "You're the first Republican who's ever knocked them, and you're only knocking on Republican doors because you have a street list. So it's not like you're randomly going to doors." They were easily 20, 30 people who were like, "Wow, I've never had a Republican knock on my door," and they're appreciative of it. They thought it was
Well,
great.
that's very, very true, and to a sad degree, that's an indictment
Yes.
on Republican candidates in party in the past that they've just, even with their own base, that they haven't been as proactive in being visible with them. So it was an effective strategy to the degree, but it just wasn't a strategy that could garner enough votes. We didn't have enough time to meet enough voters.
Sure, no, which is why you need to rely on social media. You need to rely on mailers. I mean, that was a big, and that's a huge expense.
Yeah, certainly, because with a mailer, again, mailers, people are like, oh, you just do a mailer, but there's a science to that. You got to run a whole mail program, and pretty much, you do the introduction, you do persuasion, and you do GOTV, and you got to create a narrative through the mail. So you're gonna have to depend on, a voter at least getting your mail, seeing it, and then also remembering you, because at the same time, you got a number of candidates running. I think we had 7 or so.
7, well, eight at the beginning, and then
people,
one didn't get through petition.
Yeah, people got to shift through the mail, and then you're hoping that they get your mailer, number one.
Yes.
They read your mailer, number one, and then something about your mailer resonate with you. So that's a very,
because everyone did it.
It's a very costly proposition, but it is extremely effective. You can put together and pay for an effective mail program.
Because and people don't realize how expensive it is. It's
yes, very.
For super voters only, which is what I had done in the
particularly
primary.
running citywide.
Yeah. And it was $6,000, and that's just Republicans, Republican super voters for the primary.
So you go $6,000, and you said in an ideal campaign you're going to send out
3 or 4.
Yeah, well, ideally you want to sell out 5 to 7 mailers.
Wow. I couldn't afford that.
You do that math.
So yeah,
that's just mail.
And that's incredibly expensive. And you're right, that's just mail, and doesn't even include the other expense that always jumps out at me is lawn signs. They're $5 a piece, and
yeah, and you want to put them all over the city, and then you get some people in campaigns, they take them down. You got to replace them.
You got to replace them. Yeah, I mean, you could easily spend in the primary $20,000.
Oh,
just on lawn signs, and that's probably a small estimate if you're getting them out as far as you want. And then there's another thing that you learn is you want endorsements from ward leaders, but those endorsements aren't free. And it's not and I always tell people, it's not a bribe. It's, hey, we're going to endorse you, but we need money to get people out on the street. We need money for printing. We need printing the ballots, et cetera. So
I think a lot of people, particularly who are looking to go into public service, have an idea and a passion and think they could be a leader, and then they're introduced to the electoral process, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that it'd be this costly," and that's just and that's for the Republican primary.
Yes. Oh, on the Democratic side, it's even more because the ward leaders on the Republican side are much less expensive than the Democrats. Because I heard some numbers thrown out from friends of mine on the who ran on the at-large side, and it was
Yeah.
It was a crazy high number.
So yeah, basically, for all those, candidates that are out there, you're building up your ideas and your platforms and your circle of friends, and all I can tell you is the first thing you want to do is raise money, raise money, raise money.
And get ready for petitions, because that's another thing. And I was ready for petitions. 3 weeks you have to get, and the at-large race is a minimum of 1,000. You want more like 1,500. And I had a team in place, and I had ward leaders ready to help me. I didn't realize how hard it was going to. And well, you remember me. I was calling you 2 weeks in, being like, Randy, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it.
Oh yeah, the aspect of garnering Republican signatures.
Yes.
And quality and good signatures is, that's why in terms of council at large races, I sure Drew is largely an insider race, because without the support of ward leaders who know where those residents and those voters live and know how to go and get them, it's very difficult to amass enough signatures just on your own. That goes to, again, the registration imbalance in Philadelphia. So finding Republican voters is not as easy as you think.
I mean, I would guess, Republican or Democrat, you're only getting someone answering the door maybe 20% of the time, probably closer to 10%.
Yep, because you got to go to their doors.
Yeah.
Unlike on the Democratic side, you can sit on the street corner. And,
yeah, exactly. Yes.
You fall out of bed and bump into a few Democrats in this town. And Republicans, not so much. You got to go find them.
You got to go find them, and you could have parties, and that did help. But it was. And you're right. You need to know where to go. Brian McCann helped me a lot in the Northeast, because I was running low, and I called him and I said, "Hey,"
Yep.
He said, "Come out with me." We went to an area. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I got 100 signatures in a day. It would take me, because I didn't know exactly what areas to go to. It probably would normally have taken me 3-4 days to get myself alone 100 signatures, and we got it in one day. And then he gave me other lists. He said, "Look, this is where you should go. These are good spots."
Yep.
And that was one of the things that saved me. I mean, I think I personally got maybe like 700-800 signatures on my own,
which was phenomenal.
Which was a huge number, and that was going out. Well, I remember a week in, I thought, I'm not going out during the day, during the week, because who's going to be home? Everyone's at work. But then a week in, I said, you know what? If I go from noon to 5 and I'm only getting 10 signatures over 2 weeks, that could make the difference. That's that's 100 signatures. So I would do that.
Well, you worked very hard going door to door. I went out collecting signatures with Drew once. Drew is a fast walker.
That's right. I remember
around. I hung back with the kids.
Yes. I walk fast no matter what. And I tell the story why
you were
I
a
walk so
machine.
fast. When we would go to Eagles games or Phillies games when we were young, my father never paid for parking. So we would park 2 miles away from the stadiums. And my father would just say, "No, you can't park near the stadium." So, and, I had these little legs, my brothers and I all did, and we had to walk 2 miles, and we were always getting to the game like 10, 15 minutes before. So we learned how to walk fast by walking to Phillies and Sixers game, which probably from like Broad and Reed. I think we were Broad and Reed Streets walking.
You didn't know everything your childhood prepared you for your adulthood.
That's right.
So you had no idea your dad's preparing you for going door knocking in the Northeast.
Oh my God, that's right. All right, so we're coming up to our first break. We're going to take a few minutes, and we'll be back.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back. You are listening to USLA Radio. I am your host, Drew Murray, and you are listening to the Republican Zone. So I'm here with my friend Randy Robinson, who was my campaign consultant or in my at-large primary bid. So speaking of campaigns, elections, we had an election a few weeks ago, and it was not a great election for the Republican Party, both locally in Delaware County and in the county surrounding Philadelphia, and definitely not in the city of Philadelphia.
No, not regionally. And the unfortunate aspect of this campaign, particularly regarding the Republican Party, it really, really demonstrated that that there's some changes that have to be made. There has to be some efforts that we become far more engaged and visible in the tapestry of Philadelphians in their lives, and not just simply during electoral cycles. That we got to be a part of the mainstream. I mean, the bottom line, there are Republicans here in this town. There are, but it's almost like you're registered, and then they give you a second card to say you're part of a secret society. Don't talk about it.
Oh yeah, it was. There were many people in my neighborhood that when I got the street list, I'm like, oh, I didn't know you were Republican, and they're like,
they whisper like, oh yeah, I'm a
don't
Republican.
tell anybody.
Yeah,
Don't tell anybody I'm a Republican. I said, don't worry, I won't tell anybody your secret, but it is public knowledge. I said, anybody can request.
Yeah,
it.
the fact that so I mean, just the outcome of the elections with us losing one of the minority seats, which is unbelievably just that happening sent shockwaves just throughout.
No, absolutely.
The region, the state. I'm pretty sure there's a national eyebrows raised to the fact that in an urban setting that you could lose seats to pretty much declared for the minority party, and in this town we've honorably and boldly just assumed that title of minority party.
Yeah, I think you're right. And now my opinion, and we didn't even talk about this before, but Kendra Brooks and Nicholas O'Rourke running as under what I call the umbrella of the Working Families Party, I think was absolutely wrong, because as they themselves said, we are lifelong Democrats who are trying to take the two minority
It's almost
seats.
like double dipping, because the fact that this Working Families Party is, I wouldn't necessarily call it a party. It's like a cause.
Exactly. It's a cause within the umbrella of the Democratic Party.
So it was a way, almost like double dipping, that the Republican, that the Democratic machine would essentially have another Democrat.
Exactly.
So it's 6-1, and I think that while people may rail and push back against the National Republican Party or brand, which I can say a lot about that, but just locally in terms of how government works, like you truly need a balance. You need a counterbalance. It's just it doesn't work. It doesn't bode well for the average person in terms of just particularly if you are a proponent of good government. And I think more so in this town, people are more so, I think we're Philadelphians first. And then, people do have a pride in their party affiliation. But, me as an African American, I don't know any black who necessarily, if you ask them who they are and you were going to attempt things to identify themselves, that Democrat Party would be a part of their personal ID.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's just simply the fact that it is a party in where they've seen the greatest gains. So anybody's going to look for support what they believe in is their best interest. But again, all the issues related to just living and surviving in today's world are still germane in those folks. Like being in a party doesn't necessarily eradicate your concerns for living because your party is winning.
Sure.
You still wake up, you have the issues, education, poverty, safety, just, financial upward wealth sustaining. And I mean, just all the dynamics still exist, even though, you're a part of a party. So I say all that, say this is that, if you're a person and you're wondering why things aren't working for you in your city, and Philadelphia has lots of woes, you hear people complain every day consistently about the issues that they're facing. You want your government to work for you. And to have it to work is that you got to have a healthy balance. This is why, this bicameral system was set up. So we can have checks and balances, and then out of that negotiations, it would produce the best public policy.
Yes.
So,
and the balance was not a huge balance of 17 council people. 2 were reserved for a minority party. And I don't think, and look, I don't know Kendra Brooks, and I'm sure she's a great person, actually. I know she's an activist, and I know she's passionate, but she does not bring the diversity that is needed. That was the underlying reason in the Home Rule Charter for reserving 2 from a minority party.
And again, the reason for this, to reserve a space for the minority party to have a voice, again, it wasn't about party politics. It is set up so that we can at least have an opportunity to have balance and produce good public policy.
Sure, no,
so
absolutely.
we can have different perspectives to weigh in on what's important to the people.
So currently, we the new people have not come in yet. So 3 Republicans are in city council now, and it's going to go down to 2. So it's we've decreased, and people who and Helen Gim's a good friend of mine. In fact, she's going to come on the show in a couple of weeks. She
not
backed,
a good friend of mine.
She backed the Working Family Party, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it in a couple of weeks. And my whole thing is, it's not even necessarily what your viewpoint is as a Democrat. It's the diverse views that are needed in order to have good government.
Certainly, and I think that the Democratic Party is not going to find. They're not happy about the almost like intrusion by this Working Families Party also, and to have Democratic elected leaders and officials to go out of their way and support this, this third party candidate didn't bode well within their circles also. So they're going to see some disruption within their ranks over that cause also.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think I look at the old school Democrat in Philadelphia as someone like Council President Clark, and this these people coming into the party are much more progressive, and not saying right, wrong, or otherwise, but they are not the same Democratic Party that there was even a couple of years ago in Philadelphia.
Yeah, very similar to the matter with the National Republican Party with the evolution, I would say, of the Tea Party, but the Tea Party didn't separate themselves. They said we're going to make our issues and take over a wing and be a caucus within the Republican Party, and it challenged Republican establishment. So at the end of the day, I think that this election did it upset establishment, the Republican establishment, and also the Democratic establishment.
Sure, no, I think both.
So what that bodes or means for the public, I'm not sure because again, it is just a minority seat. Did you need more voices at the table? I'm always for that, but in this manner, is it a voice that could actually produce public policy? No, there's no way that Kendra Brooks can offer any bill or legislation and have any chance in hell of having it passed. So what's the purpose? You're going to use that spot pretty much as a voice in a bully pulpit just to talk about issues and concerns. So there are going to be some battles there in terms of what Democrats per se are going to be beholden to just what the tenets of the Democratic Party in a traditional sense are, or those who will just shift and start leaning toward this new third party kind of really leftist idealism. I think some of the national candidates call themselves Democratic Socialists. And again, that's a minority within the majority here.
Sure. And the one good thing is, I think this was a wake-up call for the Republican Party that we need to start doing things differently. And whether that's, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, and because I'm a moderate, of course, I think we need to become more moderate. I think we need to come a little closer to the middle, because if we're going to increase the size of the Republican Party, if we're going to increase that voter base, what I always told people when I became a Republican, I said, for people who thought I was too liberal, or people would say, I'm a rhino, I'm a Republican in name only. I said, I'm like, you're not going to find a far-right person, a very, very conservative person, to recruit from the Democratic Party because they're not in the Democratic Party. You need to recruit people in the middle,
Certainly.
like me.
I think if you look at most people, and you know, I'm a registered Republican, but I talk to my friends, and you know, my politics doesn't differ from theirs. I'm absolutely a moderate Christian conservative, and I think most people, for the most part, are right in the bounds of centrist. So we need the Republican Party, and particularly in the urban area, definitely has a different kind of definition or how it sees itself than kind of the national agenda. And I think it is absolutely a wake-up party locally that we really need to work hard to establish a local identity. Some years back, there was a tremendous effort with the low opposition, and they're coming and saying that, hey, we got to be more relevant in terms of what's happening locally and create an identity for ourselves. But, you know, Joe DeFelice was, you know, kind of the point man for it, and I thought that was an absolutely great effort and something that we need to do. Just to speak to those who kind of just voices that this doesn't see themselves being represented by the Democratic establishment and definitely not by the Republican national dynamic, but our proud Philadelphians who have some views, particularly on determining the issue, could either go with either party. And I think that we need the local Republican Party need to hone in those issues that could appeal to that demographic. And one of those issues is definitely education.
Sure. No, absolutely. I always tell people that we are not going to legislate ourselves out of poverty. We are still the poorest large city in the country. We went from 26% to 25%, so we have improved a little bit, but we can't legislate ourselves out. And I think we keep, as a city, keep trying to legislate ourselves out of poverty. We need to educate ourselves out of poverty, which is one of the reasons why, even though I'm opposed to the soda tax itself, I am absolutely 100% for the programs that the soda tax funds, both the rebuild program for Parks and Recreation and the universal pre-K program. You know, I said we got to start educating all of our children, regardless of zip code, you know, before they even get to kindergarten. They need to know how to read. They need to know how to write before they enter kindergarten, because if they don't, then they're already behind. And I think that's so important.
Because the issue of education, you know, it's only debated through politics because government pays for public education. But the truth of the matter is to have an educated workforce and populace is critical for the life of large cities, particularly when we're trying to attract new businesses and, you know, like the Amazons of the world. I mean, we're in the information and technology age. So, you know, our manufacturing and clearly way beyond agriculture age, but post-industrial, we're post-industrial age. So those manufacturing jobs and those construction jobs, and to some degree, are diminishing, and you're finding the employment in all these areas that are really, really based on economics. On internet ingenuity and technology. So as Philadelphia, we don't want to be left behind. Like we got to have an educated populace. So when these companies say, "Hey, I want to relocate to the area," they're looking at a few things, and the number one thing is school and education, and also the qualification and skill set of your community. So we got to prepare our citizens for the future economy. So that's one of the issues that you know, when you look at how public education is being doled out here locally, you can find nobody's happy about that.
Sure. So we're going to take a few minutes break, and we'll be back, and I think we're going to talk about some education.
I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. And even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, Maria, and she convinced me to continue my education. Just never judges. She's a true role model.
From the depths of my heart, I thank you, Maria, for being a friend and a beautiful person. No one receives a diploma alone, and I'm honored to share this moment with you. Thank you.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back. You are listening to USLA Radio. I am your host, Drew Murray, and you are listening to the Republican Zone. So I am back here with my friend Randy Robinson, and we're going to talk about, let's talk about public school education, charter schools. One of the biggest issues that I heard on the campaign trail was, how are we going to better educate our children? And whether that's through universal pre-K, whether it's through traditional neighborhood schools, or whether it's through charter schools, there was always a line in the sand. You were either, you were a pro-charter school, or you were I don't know if it's anti-charter school or a pro-neighborhood school. I always told people, I believe in school choice. My children go to an independent Catholic school, and we have a incredible school in our neighborhood, Greenfield. It's the local public school. It's great for many kids. When we looked at it, we were actually pretty close to going there for my oldest daughter, but my oldest daughter, it just wasn't for her. She was very shy, very quiet. So even though Greenfield's a great school, it doesn't mean it's a great school for every child, right? So that's why I am a big proponent. Whenever anybody asks, what do I think of charter schools, what do I think of neighborhood schools, I said that they're both great. Number one, charter schools are public schools, and I believe in school choice, not only because even though there are some great public schools in the city of Philadelphia, there are communities that are underserved with their local schools. So having the ability to not be dictated by your zip code on whether or not you are able to go to a good school, charter schools give that option. And I know Randy, he wears a few hats, but you also represent some charter schools in the city of Philadelphia.
Absolutely. And again, I think public education is for African Americans and poor people is the greatest civil rights issue of the 21st century. Have an opportunity for the opportunity to compete in the workspace, and lift yourself up out of your situation. Mm-hmm. And, we're not all of us going to run a 4.3 40 or going to hit a 3-pointer or something like that. So our other option is that we have an opportunity to educate ourselves and better our lives. That's the promise of public education. That's the promise of this country. And unfortunately, to see that promise being limited to just an exclusive few is absolutely something that cannot be allowed in this country. So I represent charter schools. I am definitely a pro-choice, not in just education. I'm pro-choice everything. I choose what cable company I want. I choose what insurance company I want. I would choose where I want to worship. I mean, choice is the dynamic of America. So how it to be eliminated in something as critical as education is mind-boggling to me. Again, I am not a pro or anti-charter. What I am is a pro-public education person. So to diminish this into pro or anti-charter, as saying that that if you're pro-charter, you're anti-traditional public school education, then that's absolutely absurd and wrong. Sure. And actually, that's a conditioning of the political forces that have an interest in one dynamic over the other. And largely, it's the labor union that's related to traditional public schools, where there are tons of jobs there. And me, I'm pro-labor, but there are certain circumstances or industries where the well-being and rights of a union member has to be secondary to the greater picture. And in education, the outcome, the issue here, the entity here, are children. So by no means am I going to put the interest of someone's job before the interest of that child.
Sure.
So I'm just pro-public education. I need it to work. Charter schools were the advent as an answer and response to the failures of our traditional public school system. Very much as, the taxi industry can bemoan and cry and complain about rideshare services and has really, gutted their business. No, they were a response to your poor performance and your poor performances as an industry. So, people, I don't want people to be forced to feel that, that you're one or the other, because the truth of the matter is you're both, because at the end of the day, people just want an opportunity for their child to get a quality education in a public education, in a public setting where they don't have to, they don't have the funds or shouldn't have to spend additional monies to educate my kids when my tax dollars are already going to pay for an education system. So that's the choice, and so people make the arguments, the charter school system, charter schools are gutting your local public schools. Well, no charter school has ever shut down a public school. No charter school has ever diminished the population of a traditional public school. The parents shut down your neighborhood school. The parent who chose to say, here's an alternative, here's an option for my child, the parents decide where those kids go. So it's not the charter school entity that they go in and they draft and you're forced to shift kids over there like mandatory busing. No, it's parents that closes there. Parents make a decision and they decide my local school isn't up to par and performing well, then I'll decide. And I absolutely believe that should be a voice and choice of a parent. Now, granted, there is only but a certain pot of school-age children, about 220,000 or so locally, and there is a finite amount of money. Mm-hmm. So the equation has to work out where it fits the whole. There could be a point to where there are too many charter schools. Sure. And I believe that. I think that they exist. They're going to exist. But I think that the rigorous wrestling over traditional and charter school, how it works economically and financially, and all those things are getting in the way of the bigger picture of the fact that that we need to take every resource, every opportunity possible to assure that all children in Philadelphia, have a quality education. So that's why I'm a proponent of public education. I want it to work universally, and that's the PFT notwithstanding. They're just I'm sorry, but I can't be overly concerned about the dynamics of those workers when I see our children are suffering and they're being failed.
No, and it's interesting you brought up the school busing issue, because it came actually to the forefront with Kamala Harris talked about how she was that little girl who got bused to school. I look at charter schools kind of the modern day busing to schools, because if the school near you is either failing or maybe it's just not even the right school for your child, the charter schools offer that choice to either find the school that is appropriate for your child, or maybe offers the school that is a better one than the local one. But I do agree with you. I think there could be a saturation point. I don't think we're there yet in Philadelphia, at least not in every area. I would say in Center City is a good example from a grade school standpoint. I don't think we need any additional charter schools in Center City, because we have a lot of great schools. We have Greenfield, we have Meredith, we have independent charter schools.
Again, I think charter schools exist where they need to exist.
Yeah, exactly.
So charter schools are permissible to operate throughout the Commonwealth in Pennsylvania, but they're targeted and not targeted. It's where public education is failing, and that's where schools show up. I think right now we got to be a little bit more progressive. I did hear some things that was encouraging. That I've heard some dialogue out of the new school board of education. Joyce Wilkinson may have said it in their first meeting, that we got to get over the conversation, or we got to get around and beyond the narrative of charter versus charter, pro-charter, anti-charter. Because the truth of the matter is that we got to work. The overarching governing bodies need to work to see how we can make both systems be a benefit to one another. So I think once we get beyond the pro or anti-charter, which is really a pro or anti-labor narrative, that's really what that's really about. Let's talk about where it makes sense, where charter schools make sense, and where we can increase them and not it be a diminishing aspect from a quality in work in public school. So I think all schools need to be held to a standard. Sure. Charter schools are putting a rigorous standard in terms of what they have to do to maintain their charters. I think all those standards across the board should be applied to every school. I think that every school should need to go up for review every 3 to 5 years to determine if, in fact, is this a school that needs to be remain open. If we can have just a system where we grade them across the board universally, then I think that would be a fairer dynamic in a sense of trying to provide quality public education, as opposed to just being hypercritical on one side and then just simply resolute for whatever outcomes that the traditional public school has.
And I think, honestly, the charter schools have made the traditional neighborhood public schools better. I mean, you look at a place like Greenfield. I think Greenfield 20 years ago was a good school, but now it is a phenomenal school. I think it really made those neighborhood schools, if they want to survive and if they want to continue as a school, they had to figure out how to improve. And Greenfield is an example that it may not be able to be emulated throughout the city because they had this guy, Dan Lazar, who was just the rock star principal. And he is what really helped, I don't want to say turn Greenfield around because it was a good school before, but now it is a blue ribbon school of excellence. And I think those charter schools that have come, places like Independence Charter, where you have to be, I think 1 in 1,000 is your chance of getting into that school with the lottery. It's made the other schools better. You couldn't put a charter school next to Greenfield, not if you're hoping to attract the neighborhood kids, because no one's going to go there.
That school, I mean, public schools and neighborhood schools are byproducts of the neighborhood. If you have an intact neighborhood where you have parents, intact home, and they have the wherewithal to have the time to be just there and visible, because no matter where you send your kid, your parent, schools don't work unless the parents believe.
I agree.
That's the bottom line. So if you have a neighborhood where you have large parental input, then largely you're going to have a better product at that school because the principal and the administration there know I'm accountable to those parents that come there. So unfortunately in Philadelphia, every neighborhood isn't as intact as the community that Greenfield is in. So you got to put other things in and buffers to assure that regardless of the quality of life in that neighborhood, that we can put up, that we could create a learning environment that's safe and also works and educates our kids. So this is what I do know. Bad schools don't exist in good neighborhoods. The neighborhood won't allow it. But you can have a good school in what's determined as a bad neighborhood because you have the passion of some of the parents, and then you have the input, particularly the resources input into that school, that regardless of the socioeconomic conditions of the community, that school can be a success.
And another thing I find interesting, and again, I agree with you. I don't think one should be pro-charter or anti-charter or pro-traditional public school. I look at the magnet schools, and I look at them very much like charter schools because they pull from all around the city.
Yeah,
right?
Because they're special admit. I mean, the fact of the matter, if we got rid of all special admit schools, and then we just simply say that every school and every community had to raise it to a certain standard, then you wouldn't have an issue of traditional and charter, whatever. What you just have an issue of that I need a school that's going to educate my kids, and if this school isn't reaching its mark, then that school has to go and be replaced with something else. So I mean, charter schools. The unfortunate thing about that, it only works to change the community if everybody gets to go there. So if you had more charter schools and they became in catchment zones where that all the kids from the neighborhood can go to the school, then you can see the quality of life change in the neighborhood because you have a greater educational experience.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break. In a few minutes, we'll be back with Randy Robinson.
$150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
Our hearts are made stronger by how we treat others.
Put her there.
The light you share can impact those around you, but so can the darkness.
Later, twerps! Did Pete saying mean things bother ya?
So when you reach out to another person, take a moment to consider how they will feel and let your heart be the key to making a difference. Because of you, someone's entire day, year, or even life can change.
In every heart, there's hope.
Welcome back. You were listening to Usalu Radio. I am your host, Drew Murray, and you are listening to the Republican Zone. I'm here with my friend Randy Robinson, my former campaign consultant. I'm sure future campaign consultant as well. I don't know if I'll be able to afford you in my next campaign for state rep.
Well, you know,
we'll see.
It's not a great business model, but the fact of the matter is that and the bigger picture is that we need persons like you, particularly in the local Republican Party, and just a part of the leadership dynamic. So whatever it is the campaign can afford, then I 100% want to attest that I'll be there for you, my brother.
Yes. So, yeah, my next campaign will be the 182nd Legislative District of the state of Pennsylvania. I'll be running for the seat. Well, I should say I am almost positive I'm running for the seat. I'm not ready to put my paperwork in yet.
Well, the good thing is that you're in a district, so it'll be a more confined area where you can do your aggressive door knocking and walking around. So
I think it's
you're
going to be
prepared for that.
I think it's going to be an easier race. No race is easy, but the fact that I won't have to drive to the greater Northeast and then in the same night be driving to far down in South Philadelphia and then heading over to West Philadelphia. The fact that it's in Center City.
Yeah, I mean, because when you're in a district, you can just talk about the issues germane to that community, and it's not, while the Republican and Democratic thing definitely has its input, but people just care about what's going on in their community, and they'd be more willing to elect someone whom they feel will have the right approach in presentation for representing their community. So,
and it's a different race, right? Because it's not, there aren't going to be 3 events every night. I mean, I think this is going to be. I think the reason it's not easier is because as much as I did door knocking before, I think once petitions are over, the next step is you're door knocking right away, and you're door knocking from, early March. You're door knocking during petitions, obviously, but you're door knocking from March, through the primary and then through the summer all the way to the general election. I think that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That again,
and money.
Well,
money.
Of course, money. But door knocking is just akin to the fact that you got to go out and meet voters. So I guess the biggest door knocking challenge will be finding enough Republican voters to get you on the ballot.
Yes, and that is it's interesting because when I was getting my petition signed for city council, I spent one Saturday in the 8th Ward, and I said this is the last day I'll spend in the 8th Ward because it was so hard to get signatures in Center City.
I doubt that you're going to have a challenge in the primary. So it'll be an elongated period of actually making an appeal to voters because this will be one of the few general election races. So you're really going to have to just make an inroads in terms of name ID and just your position with the community, so that when the general election comes around, people just aren't looking at the top of the ticket stuff and go, for my state rep, let me just go to party line as
sure.
So if they don't have enough information to make an informed decision about that, to have them just pause and not just go straight D or whatever, then that's what you'll get rolled up in the general election.
Sure. Well, what's interesting too is speaking to the people who go in, and my mother was a pull-the-lever Democrat. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be able to do that anymore, and I don't know when that legislation will be official.
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to. You're
they're
not
going
to
eliminate the straight.
They're going to eliminate it, and I think
I'm all for it.
I am absolutely
not just simply for the fact that not some interest of mine of taking down the Democratic Party, but also that I think the voter, need to make individual decisions about every race because, I vote, and I'm a Republican, but I vote across the board.
Sure.
I've always made independent decisions and choices. And I think the better educated the electorate is in terms on each race, it's better for the end result, which I'm a proponent of, good government and policy. So
because it becomes an informed vote, right?
It becomes an informed vote.
You're not just pushing the D button or the R button.
Yes.
And it depends on where you are in the state. I don't think this is going to benefit
Because that's
Democrats or Republicans overall.
That's electoral lazy. That's just simply like, oh, okay, I don't really care to look into who these people are, or candidates whom just kind of ride that wave and say, hey, I don't have to campaign hard. I'm gonna get your vote because it's a down ballot race and nobody knows, so they're just going to take the choice that the choice of their party that's given to them, and they go with it. So
I mean, I look at every person that I'm voting for in a race, and I think I have become more informed once I actually ran for city council. But when I was a Democrat, one of the reasons, there were many reasons I became a Republican. I say I didn't leave the Democratic Party; the Democratic Party left me. But when I finally decided to make the change, I realized that in general elections, because I always looked at the person who I was voting for. Toward the end, I realized and I knew, other than races like when I'm voting for Council President Clark, because he's literally the only one you can vote for in those elections, I was voting for more Republicans than I was voting for Democrats. So I think it's going to be a good thing. And again, I don't think this is something that's going to be beneficial to either party statewide, but I do think the Republicans are going to benefit from that new legislation, because people are going to go in and they are going to have to think about who they're voting for. And hopefully that means they will start to maybe do a little more research and find out about people. Because I think a lot of people in Philadelphia just go hit the straight Democrat, and on the Republican side as well. I think people go and they hit straight Republican. To actually have to push individual buttons, I think is gonna be good for the government and good for the Republican Party, specifically here in Philadelphia. So
it may give us a chance in some races, particularly these community-based races down ballot in districts, that you can have a person such as yourself who's a former Democrat from the party, but you represent the interests and kind of the spirit of that community, that people may be willing to regard as a party affiliation, may be willing to give you an opportunity to represent them.
Sure, and I think as I said before, as bad as the election was regionally and specifically in Philadelphia and specifically for Republicans in the city of Philadelphia, in that we lost one of the minority seats for the first time, I believe, in 70 years, it was a wake-up call. And it was such a wake-up call that we have a new leader of the Republican City Committee, and that leader is, for the first time, I believe, on both sides of the aisle, it's the first time it's a woman, in Martina White.
That was a point that I failed to recognize. You're absolutely right. This will be the first female party leader that we have. So Martina, who's young, younger person, comes from the Northeast, who's
a state rep, for those who might not know who Martina is.
Who actually enjoyed lots of labor support.
Yes.
So that's one of the unique dynamics of her being a Democrat. She does enjoy lots of labor support, particularly the FOP and the Teamsters seem to really care for her. She's been again being a part of the majority, but being from Philadelphia, again, like there was a time in Philadelphia that we actually had several Republican representatives in the General Assembly, and guess what? They were an asset to Philadelphia.
Sure, John
Taylor was phenomenal in a sense. Here's a guy who represented the community. His party affiliation notwithstanding, people supported him. And then at the end of the day, he was important for the Philadelphia delegation, because when you go to Harrisburg, the number one definer isn't Republican or Democrat. It's actually geography. It's Philadelphia versus the rest of the state.
Oh, absolutely. The rest of the state does not like Philadelphia.
No, whatsoever. So most issues really chart along geographical lines. So to have Philadelphia to have members, or even southeastern Pennsylvania to have members who were in leadership or had some impact in all four caucuses, was significant and important. Unfortunately, now campaigns and not campaigns, but politics has just wound itself down to this kind of zero-sum game. It's almost like spectator sports, us versus them, and anybody who's not us is against us. And we've lost this kind of regional strategy along with government, because there are so many things and issues that come up in the Commonwealth in the General Assembly that's germane to Philadelphia, a first-class city in southeastern Pennsylvania. We have a lot of the issues that aren't prevalent across the state. So there is some significant interest in policy that the city and also this region absolutely need to get out of Harrisburg. And so we need people across the board that understands that. So having Christina be a Republican from
Martina.
Martina, I'm sorry. Martina being a Republican from Philadelphia in Harrisburg is actually an asset. So I'm looking forward to her era in terms of leadership. I'm not sure how much heavy lifting she wants to get into and breaking up a lot of the civic squabbles and things that we've had going on.
We're a very parochial party, and I think that's something we need to get beyond. And look, Michael Mean and the Mean family meant so much to the Republican Party over the years, but I do think I think to have not only a new face, but a young face and a woman to kind of spread the demographic of the Republican Party here in Philadelphia is really important, and I think Martina's going to do a great job going forward.
Yeah, I look forward to again her leadership, her era, and she's always been an open door, very affable, and she's taken some stances that particularly labor absolutely support, and I look forward to it. So I don't know what to say except for I look forward to it. It's a breath of fresh air, an opportunity, and so I hope in her leaderships that she start to identify other young leaders to taking leadership posts in the local party.
Sure, and I think there are a few of us running for state rep, and I think part of the reason and thought process behind that is we need to get into these races, and we started to do it in the city council races. We can't just leave that button empty when you want to walk into the voters booth and all you see is, and I actually get along with Council President Clark, but you never see a Republican running against him, and that's important. We need to be in these races. And
you got to be in the races because again, at the bottom line, it legitimizes you as a legitimate party.
Yes,
the fact that you have candidates, but secondarily, we have candidates who believe they can win in these kind of state rep races means that they're active and engaged in their communities. So we got to have the party at least have some presence across the city.
And I think
we just can't write off 50 wards or 2/3 or 3/4 of our legislative seats, our state rep seats, and say we're not going to compete in those areas because we don't have any presence in that community.
And when I tell people Democrat and Republican, I say, look, Harrisburg and the rest of Pennsylvania, even though Philadelphia is the economic driver of this entire state, the rest of the state doesn't view us as that, and they dislike us. And one way to kind of maybe stop that dislike, or one way to communicate with people in Harrisburg, are have more Republicans from Philadelphia who run for these offices and win these seats, because the state legislature in Pennsylvania is still majority Republican. So I tell people, Democrat, Republican, I said, if you want Philadelphians to get along with Harrisburg, then I think we need to start electing more Republicans in the city of Philadelphia.
Well, you'll see issues, and particularly like now you have the issue of the school district, forced to address the issues of our facilities, but most of our buildings are more than 70 years old, and you look at the cost of lead and asbestos abatement, just other general maintenance issues that we just have with facilities. That's not even the quality of education. Where's that money going to come from?
That's got to come from the state.
It's going to come from the state. So we got to go, every time we got to go to the state, which is pretty much code word for saying we got to go and convince some Republicans that this is a legitimate issue for the city, which makes it a legitimate issue for the Commonwealth. So wouldn't it be grand if we had legislators that were in those caucuses that could be taking that fight on a daily basis in Harrisburg and voicing that dynamic where they have some skin in the game in terms of what's happening?
No, absolutely. And you're right. It just came out today how much money, Dr. Haidt had mentioned today, that I think it's 80% of the schools have asbestos, which that doesn't surprise me. And as long as asbestos is not airborne, it is actually not dangerous, but it's still not good that we have these in schools, because you never know, if you're getting work done in the school, if someone doesn't have the ability or the knowledge or the background to recognize asbestos and they start drilling into it, for example, then it becomes airborne, and we can't solve the asbestos problem locally from municipal standpoint.
Again, here's another dynamic where I think that the evolution of charter schools could actually be an asset in where the district could work together. The truth of the matter is that the district has a facilities problem, let alone, not let's talk about the quality of education. They have a facilities problem. And these buildings are just old and aged, and I think we're 20 years late in terms of making these capital improvement and addressing those issues. So while this report came out and talking about the cost of asbestos and lead removal, as if this is not new.
Sure.
The school district commissioned the Parsons report under Dr. Hyatt, I think about 4 years ago. Wow. That at that point, it said that the school district and their facilities were at $4 billion in a hole in terms of repairs for their buildings, and rise, not a static number, and rising.
Wow.
So the issue of the quality of our school and buildings and their maintenance issue is not new.
All right. So I think we could probably talk about asbestos and the issues with the facilities of the school district of Philadelphia for another hour, but we have come to the end. So thank you to Randy, and thank you for listening to the Republican Zone.